Hey friends, welcome to the library or welcome back to the library. I have with me today author Hailey Dickert, and I'm super excited to be chatting because she's also just owner, right? Owner and of the Scribbles shop bookshop.
Scribbles Bookshop. Yeah.
Yeah, Scribbles Bookshop, and I'm super excited because oh my gosh, if you have not visited Scribbles Bookshop, you absolutely should. I'll make sure to have it in the show notes, but she has so many signed copies of books from I would say nearly 100 authors at this point. You
Yeah, we
have a
actually
lot.
this week, so we have signed books by over 90 romance authors. We have almost 200 titles, and I'm pretty sure our goal was to hit 100 authors by the end of the year, but I think it'll be next week actually.
Yay! Oh my
Yeah,
gosh,
and
that's
they're
so
like
exciting.
99.9% indie. And even like the trad authors that we do have, a lot of them are hybrid. Like they have
Yeah.
both. So we work mainly with indie authors, which I feel like is a little more unique because like a lot of indie bookstores are indie, but they have a lot of traditionally published books, and
Mm-hmm.
we are more indie books and a little bit of the traditionally published books. So
Yeah. So exciting. Okay. Anyways, we're moving forward. We'll come back to this. Tell us a little bit about how you got started writing yourself, and how that kind of led into your shop, or if those things, vice versa, how those managed together.
yeah, so I mean, tale as old as time. Like I kind of grew up writing. I wrote like silly stories in a journal. I actually started with writing music. So when I was in middle school, I learned to play guitar and I could always sing. So I started writing songs. And like all through middle school and high school, I like wrote music, and that was kind of like how I like shared my creativity. And yeah, so then like after I graduated high school and like went to college, and music kind of fell to the background. I had to study, I had to do all of these things, and then after graduating high school, I started a blog, which I feel like the blog to author pipeline is like very hot. But I started a blog, and it was a lifestyle blog. And then when I moved to Germany to live with my husband 7 years ago or 8 years ago, and it became like a lifestyle travel blog. And then that actually kind of like disappeared. Like I stopped working on it because, like everybody, I got a full-time job. I just had no
Mhm.
time, like whatever. And then in 2022, I started reading again, like a lot. And I had liked to read when I was younger, but I wasn't like addicted to it per
Yeah.
se. And then early 2022, I like picked up a book on my honeymoon, and then I just never stopped reading. And I think I read like 200 books that year, 100 books that year or something. I don't remember. But it kind of was one of those like Elle Woods moments, like, what? Like, it's hard, Like, I was like, oh, I feel like I've read plenty of them, and like I always liked to write, and like I was
Mhm.
always creative, and I was like, oh, I feel like I could write a story, like I feel like I could have. And then I like had an idea, and I like started working on it. And I'm a person that like if I start a project, like I can't not finish it. Like I hate quitting things. And yeah, that book actually became The Sister Between Us, which is my debut novel. And it was not easy. So, I said, what, like, it's hard? Like, yes, it's very hard.
It is.
It was very hard, but like, I still did it. And it was a lot of trial and error and learning
Yeah.
and editing. And like, the first draft that I wrote is like 500 drafts before the one that I published. But yeah, that's kind of like how I got started and like the journey to my first book.
Mm. Oh my goodness. That's interesting. I am really, did you like intentionally choose to move like after your debut? Next came return policy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, what, just because ignorance here,
Yep.
do you think, are they the same or did you shift a little bit?
I would say they're very different. Like,
Okay.
so how I kind of like describe it is like The Sister Between Us is a second chance sports romance, soccer, childhood friends to lovers, make you ugly cry, put you back together
Mm.
again type of story. It's like very heart wrenching. And like, if you can get through it without crying, like I would be if you're actually like into the story and you can get through it without crying, like I would be very surprised. And it's, I feel like it's very different in the way that, so Return Policy is a college romance. It's like that university romance that people love. It has like the Friends vibes and like all of that. Lots of like going to the beach with the friends and like those situations. And don't get me wrong, there's still like a plot in there, and there's like Sophia's keeping a secret, and I'm not going to do any spoilers because I know that you're reading it. You know, she's keeping a secret, and there's like suspense and things like that. But with The Sister Between Us, I feel like it was less focused on like a plot and more on like their love story. And Return Policy, I feel like, is like, there is their love story, of course, but there's like this underlying plot, you know, because sometimes stories are character driven and sometimes they're plot driven. And like if they're character driven, it's like just totally you're learning like the story of their lives, I guess, if that makes sense. And like with Return Policy, like the plot is not just to do with the characters. Like there's other things that are like happening. So I feel like that's how they're very different. And then also like The Sister Between Us is more like small town romance. It's like they from their hometown where they grew up, like, you know, going to high school and like these kind of little small town vibes. And then where Return Policy is like big college, big city kind of like it's a small coastal city, but like they're still at a big college, you know?
Yeah.
So for me, I feel like those are where the vibes are like very different.
Okay. Does your mind shift, like your mindset have to shift whenever you change from one to the other, like what as far as like writing goes?
Absolutely. And I will say this too, because I know a lot of authors feel the same way, that our lives, like kind of our headspace and our lives like reflect in our writing. So for example, The Sister Between Us and Return Policy, I wrote them like during a darker time in my life. Like I had just lost like a few people like passing away, and I had like a lot of grief inside, and writing for me was like a big outlet to like get the grief out. And then like when I wrote Merry Mischief List, actually that book was never supposed to exist. That's my holiday novella, and that one has like zero deeper topics. It's a total rom-com, total fun vibes. Like I always say, the only content warning really is like the overt sexualization of Santa Claus and his elves. Like there's not really, you know, whereas like in The Sister Between Us and Return Policy, you have like those deeper content warnings, like death, grief, like whatever. And it totally has to also do with like headspace, like where I was personally at the time. Because like when I wrote The Sister Between Us and Return Policy, I was like grieving, and you know that was like very therapeutic. And then when I moved to Merry Mischief List, that book actually happened because I was pregnant. And I couldn't handle the deep emotions. Like I could not handle the grief, the pain, because authors like feel when we write, like most of us, like if I write a scene that makes you cry, I probably cried while writing it, like, you know. And being pregnant and all of those emotions, I was like, I can't handle this, because the book that I was working on was like very dark. So I just totally flipped and was like, I'm going to do something light and fun and whatever. And like you asked, like that's like a reflection of like where my headspace was, because I was like, I need that. Like, you know, and so what's going on around you can like 100% affect. And obviously not everybody is that way, but for me, I can totally be affected in my mood. Like, how can you sit down to write a happy scene where everybody's happy if like, you know, someone you love is like in the hospital, or, you know, it's like hard to sometimes make that separation.
Yeah, because I mean, a lot of times, and I'm in a massive Discord, but we end up talking a lot about separating fiction from reality and knowing the difference. And when you're in an author space, just from the conversations that I've had and the few that I work hand in hand with, it's very hard to separate that sometimes because of the connection that you have to your characters.
Right.
So you need to be in their headspace in order to write some of the scenes, or most of them. And if you don't have the mental capacity to do so, or you don't have your spoons to do so, it's just not possible.
Right. So for me, actually the book I'm working on now, and I know we'll talk about it a little bit about that later, but it's called Even Exchange, and the plot has changed tremendously since last year when I had started writing it, because it was originally going to be a much darker story. And the female main character was going to have like a very dark background with very abusive family and like very dark situation. And, you know, it's just, so now going back into writing it, I actually like changed a lot of that. And it's just interesting, like, you know, like you say with the headspace, like and that's why I couldn't write her book when I was pregnant, because it's like to be in her headspace of a girl or a woman who grew up in an abusive home, like physically abusive, mentally abusive, and like all of the things that she had to endure in her life to like make her who she was. And basically that would lead to the plot of the book. It just like wasn't possible for me, you know? And then like once now that I'm like in her head again and working on the story again, it was like, it sounds funny, but sometimes like the characters choose who they are. And I was like, I was like, something is not working like with this story. Like I was forcing a plot line that like just didn't make sense. And I ended up like, I've changed a decent amount about the characters because it just wasn't who they are, like, you know, who they were. And I think once it's all said and done, I'll be like very happy with it. But it's definitely hard because you're sitting there with like, I had like 3/4 of a manuscript and I'm sitting there going like, none of this works. Like, I don't like this. Like, you know, and like, you know, there's dark, you have darkness in romance and like bad things that happen. But I never want it to be without purpose. Like not like just writing a scene that's terrible for the sake of it, you know, like if you're reading something that like happened that was like horrible, like there should be like a reason for it. So yeah, that's like just a long-winded way to say like, yeah, sometimes things even change like after you've written, like especially the first draft, and then like especially if you put a manuscript to the back burner and come back to it and you're like in a different headspace, you're gonna write a different story.
Yeah. And those emotions also, I see them bleed into many authors' daily lives too. Like, so for you at the time, like you said, you were pregnant, and I could not imagine being in that position, trying to get in that headspace. And it just feels depresso.
Exactly.
The entire time. I would imagine a pregnant lady crying all the time.
Yeah. When I just wasn't excited to write. Like I was not like, yes, I can't wait to get to my desk and write in this, because like it was a heart-wrenching story and I like was not in the headspace to write that, or let alone read it, you know? And that's why, like I said, Merry Mischief List, which is part of the Crystal Bay University series, was not even a book that was supposed to exist. It was like, I had kind of set up a little bit in return policy for the characters just to like be a little likable, so that maybe someday they could have their own stories, not necessarily even together. But they're like very side characters, you know, which is something I like too, because if people read Merry Mischief List and they haven't read my other 2 books, there's nothing in there that would ruin the plot from the other 2 books. Because, you know, for me, my books are all part of an interconnected universe and they can totally be read out of order. But return policy is the younger sister for Sophia from The Sister Between Us. So like or from Jake from The Sister Between Us. So like it is better to like read them in order, even though you don't have to, you know, but Merry Mischief List is like totally separate, which is nice too.
They're all so cute. Okay. So, we know a little bit about your switch from one to the other. What was your inspiration like drawing for these stories?
So for The Sister Between Us, you know, it's really hard to say, honestly, like what exactly inspired the story. Like, I don't know. I knew I wanted like a friends to lovers situation. And so for The Sister Between Us, for example, it is a book that, like, you know, a lot of second chance romances, they have like a single timeline with flashbacks. And I did a split timeline. So like the first half of the book is like when they're younger, like in high school, and then the second half of the book is when they're adults. And from like feedback, like half the people love that it's different, and half the people are like, I wish it was flashbacks. You can't like please everybody. But the funny thing is that half that was from when they were in high school actually became because I wanted to write a oh my gosh, my mind is blanking. Prologue. I wanted to write a prologue just to like give the reader a little bit of idea of like who the characters were before we got to the present timeline. And then it became like 30 chapters. So because, you know, and it's also as an author, you know, I don't know if you know, like the iceberg theory. It's like the tip of the iceberg is like what the reader gets, and everything below the water is everything that the author had to know to write the story. Yeah. So basically like I had to like create the whole iceberg to be able to write the second half of the story. But then by the time I finished that first part that was supposed to be the prologue, I like didn't want to get rid of it because I felt like as a reader, I would love to like be there. Like I want to be there. I want to see them fall in love. I want to see the process. And then I like, why do they care once they get to that like 8 years later? Kind of. So it's really hard to say like exactly where the inspiration came from. I feel like it was just like for example, the female main character in The Sister Between Us, when she's older, she's a flight attendant. And at the time, like one of my best friends was a flight attendant. So like, you know, and like there's a part of them being in Amsterdam, and I had traveled like a few times that year to Amsterdam. And so, you know, you have, like you say, you're blending this like fictional world, like even Longwood, which is the city where they live, is like the neighborhood where like I had like grown up, kind of, you know? So it's like blending all of these parts of yourself, but like making it fiction, if that makes sense. And like actually like this city is like, so the name is based on an area where I grew up, but like the actual town that I described is like based on an area where I like vacationed a lot, and that was like my inspiration, you know? And so regarding like the exact story, I feel like it was just like kind of having these like tropes and ideas of maybe what I want to tell, and knowing like it's hard to describe it without being like what's the word? It's hard to describe it without spoiling anything. But basically like the plot twist in The Sister Between Us, I knew what I wanted it to be the entire book, and I didn't want it. Like, I was like, is there any way around it? Is there any way that this doesn't happen? But because of the story and how it is, that's what it had to be. And sometimes, like, as an author, like, I've had people even, like, message me and be like, I can't believe you did this. And it's like, sometimes, like, we don't have a choice, because if it was anything but that, like, the rest of the story falls apart, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like sometimes like the story like tells itself, I guess, if that makes sense. So I guess like for the stories themselves, I can't exactly say like where my inspiration came from the plot lines. Like for Return Policy, it was more like I knew what the love story was going to be and who the characters were going to be and who they were going to be related to from like the first book. But regarding the plot, like that actually didn't come until after my developmental edit, when my editor was like, well, it's a good story and I like their love, but like the plot needs more. And then I kind of like did a brainstorming session with a friend of mine, and we were like, how can we, like, what can we do to make this crazy? Like, what can we do to like elevate this so that people are like, what the, you know, like, and it was basically just going back and forth of like, would this work? Would that work? Till we got to a point that we were like, oh, like that could work. And then it's like, no, that doesn't work. It's too crazy. And then you keep coming back to that and you're like, okay, how can we make it work? So like I said, it's like for the plots, I'm not sure where the inspiration exactly came from. I can't really tell you that, but I can just say that like my characters and locations and things like that are definitely like not exactly by specific people, but just drawn from like daily inspirations, you know, like things you experience at places you've been. And most of the people you talk to will say the same thing. Like that the area, the cities are based on a town that they visited for vacation or whatever, you know.
Yep. I've had quite a few authors be like, "Oh, well, this is, how one of my friends talks, but it's how the other one walks, and it's got this one's sassiness and
Yeah.
just
And like,
pieces of all my friends or
right.
pieces of my family or just random people I talk to, you know?"
Exactly. And something funny too is like, so for example, in Merry Mischief List, they do like a holiday naughty list or whatever. But one of the stories in it is like based on something that happened to a friend of mine. And it's not really a spoiler because it has like nothing to do with the plot. So basically, she wanted like a rocking horse for Christmas and like,
Mhm.
didn't like she I can't remember, she either didn't get it or she got the wrong color, and she like cried like so hard, like she was so devastated, and she said like to this day she's still embarrassed that she like cried so hard because she didn't get the one that she wanted. So in Merry Mischief List, the background story was she wanted a pink rocking horse for Christmas, and instead she got a brown rocking horse, and she cried so hard that she threw up on the Christmas tree. And that, like, with permission, obviously, like I got that from my friend, and it's like an inside joke. Like I even have, I mean, I know we're not like nobody else can see this, but like we even have like the sticker for the book says Childhood Christmas Trauma Club with like a pink
Oh
little
my gosh.
rocking horse. And there's just stories that like sometimes people like even let you, like when she told me that story, I was like, this would be perfect. And she's like, you can use it, like I'm not using it for anything, and she's an author too, actually. But it's just now like an inside joke for us too, because it's like I got to use her childhood trauma like in the book and like of course make it a little fiction, like a little exaggerated that she threw up on the Christmas tree. But yeah, just stuff like that, like friends inspiring you, like stories that people tell you, like
Hmm.
not meaning you write their story exactly, but it like inspires you to write something else in a different way.
Yeah. And I cannot tell you how many times I have had like brainstorming sessions and doing edits, because I've worked hand in hand with quite a few indie authors. So I always, it is my pleasure to like, I know you're putting your baby in my hands, and it makes me want to cry for you because I know you're nervous and I'm nervous because I feel like if I say the wrong thing, you're going to be upset with me. And you're like, oh, what if they hate it? And I'm just like, I could never, if
But
I'm
at the
on your
same
team.
time, for an author, like that's why we hire editors. Like I
Yeah.
don't want my editor to be soft on me. Of course, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Like I don't want my
Yeah.
editor to be like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard, like but it's
Hmm.
important because, and I'm the same thing with betas, like with alphas, with betas, with editors. I want those people to be the ones that are the most critical, because yeah, sure, it might hurt my feelings a little bit, but what's going to hurt my feelings more is when 500 other people say
Yeah.
that in a review. And I would
Yep.
rather, like, the thing is, so I know some people who only want to get like a few beta readers. And for
Yeah.
those of you listening, if you're not an author, a beta reader is somebody who reads the story before you're done with it to like make sure if there's anything problems or plot holes or whatever.
Hmm.
And I know some people who only want to have like a few beta readers, and they usually use the same ones. And I am not that person. I do 2 or 3 rounds. I use like 10, 20. I've had 30 beta readers before for a book. And the reason being, and even it's like as I edit it, so like once it's the
Yeah.
most perfect version, I have like another round. And the reason being because you can have this consensus of, oh, well, 5 people said the same thing. And
Yep.
it's like if only one person out of 30 said it, you're kind of like maybe they're the black sheep, or so to say.
Hmm.
But it's like if 15 out of 30 said it, even if I don't necessarily agree, I might want to listen and be like, is there a different way
Yeah.
I can like say this? And that's especially when you get to like sensitivity reading and like things like that. Whereas like, so for Merry Mischief List, because it was a rom-com, it was a rom-com. Andy was a bisexual character. Knox is like assumedly bisexual. It hasn't been like really, but you have to have sensitivity readers, like you have to have
Mhm.
LGBTQIA sensitivity readers,
Yep.
etc. And there's people who are going to be overly sensitive, and you kind of have to like decide, do I care about this advice? And then there's other people, like there's other times where it's like, if multiple people say, well, this doesn't bother me, but somebody else might find it offensive, you might want to like change it. Cause you know, the thing with humor is, and especially if you go back to like look at like the 90s and the 2000s, and like the thing with like stand-up comedians, like they were like borderline offensive. Like that's why a lot of them were so funny, because and so now when you're like writing, like, and we're very intentional, like I'm very intentional, I get sensitivity readers, I don't want to offend anybody, but a lot of times when you're writing a rom-com, there are things that you say that could become like borderline, I don't know to who, offensive. And that's why I say, like, in my content warnings, the sexualization of Santa Claus and his elves, because there's going to be people out there who are like, I can't believe you compared Santa to getting a lap dance, or like whatever, you know, like there's going to be people. But it's just important, like for me, if you have a group of people, like 30 or 20 or 10 or whatever, you can see if like more than one person feels like that way, you know?
Yeah. 100%. And I think it's probably, from what I can tell from the process, and again, this may be me speaking out of ignorance, somebody is welcome to correct me, but I feel like it's just as important to have those betas as it is to have 1,000 ARC readers.
Oh, and more important, in my opinion, because an ARC reader, like advanced reader copy, that means the book's done. Like maybe you're copy editing it, maybe you're fixing some punctuation, but the book is done. Like we don't want your opinions. Like you can review it, but we don't need your opinions anymore. Like obviously if something very offensive was found, I would want to know, because you can still, like as an indie author, you can still correct it. But like usually by the time it gets to ARCs, I'm done. Like I am done with the book. I'm not changing a sentence because you think it could have been written better or like whatever. But the beta readers, you're still in that space where you can change like entire characters. Like you can change entire chapters. If like there's a person in the book that people are like, why are they even here? Like there's a third person, like if there's like a third friend always standing in the room, but they're never doing anything, people might say like, just delete that character. Like, you know, and that's the big difference. Like I feel like it's more important to have a strong beta team than to even have a ton of ARC readers, because at least when your book does come out, you know that it's in the best version it can be, you know?
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. And the process of when you're the alpha or the beta, which the difference here is alpha is I'm reading it as they're finishing chapter by chapter.
Right.
And then beta is, you've got most of the story, if not all of it, completed on the first rough draft. And we're still going back and adding more scenes or tweaking characters, or they're still writing pieces, that kind of thing. Alpha is a little bit complicated, because I know that this is like a massive work in progress, and you're probably not even sure that this is what you want it to be. So I'm like, I'm liking this section here. Please do not remove this section. Like I'm screaming in all caps in the doc. Please do not remove this.
And a lot of times as the author, it's hard with alphas too, because like, you know, the alpha reader will say something like a suggestion, and as the author you're like, oh yeah, I know, I already planned to like do that or whatever. So that's why, like for me, I'm like planning to finish, like what I usually do is I'll finish my first draft and then I'll self-edit it myself first to like the best version that I think it could be, like for that draft, and then I'll bring in an alpha, because otherwise it's like wasting time, because you know you're sitting there going, okay, what am I, like I'm not going to comment on everything, what am I going to choose to be critical about, you know? And so that's why it's like important for it to be like the best version, like of the first draft that I think it could be, before we like bring someone in, so that, you know, you're not wasting your time by suggesting stuff that I'm like, I already know that needs to be changed, or like whatever, you know?
Yeah. I'm just like, hey, this is missing a person, or hey,
you said you were in the kitchen, but there's a lake.
Like, you left a person out of this scene, or there's an extra person in this scene, or everybody's standing in weird positions, or everybody's sitting in weird sections, or we're facing the wrong people.
Exactly. My friend Amber Cordova, she is also an author, and she posted something the other day about her editor saying, hey, did he forget to like call her or something? And she was like, no, he didn't forget. Amber forgot.
Oh, goodness, that's funny.
Yeah.
Okay, so since we're talking about processes,
yeah.
Are you a pantser or are you a full plotter?
So usually I'm a full plotter. So I have like this whole system. Like first I do a brain dump of like everything I think's going to happen in the book, regardless of like who's going to say what, like just everything, the plot line, everything. And then I have like a 3 or 4 outline draft process. So then I go to like my second outline where I like split it up by like section, like by chapter. And then put it all in like chronological order of like how it should be, and then I split it up by chapter, like where like what would make sense to be like grouped together. And then the very last thing I do is pick point of view, because I write dual point of view, and I like go through and I pick like for each chapter, they say to like pick point of view with intention. So some people like to just swap back and forth, like one chapter is the male main character, one chapter is the female, and back and forth. But actually a lot of the times in the story, you have to like pick with intention, like why did you choose the male main character to be in that point of view? Is it because if it was the female's point of view, there's information that she would think that we don't want the reader to know yet, because you want to avoid this unreliable narrator situation where they're like, let's say like the female main character knew that somebody died and the male main character didn't. And then they go somewhere where like that happened. And if it was the female's point of view, she would be thinking about it. And if it's the male, like he's oblivious. And then later when we find out, the reader would think, why did the female main character not think anything about it at all? Like it feels unreliable, unrealistic. So something for me that's super important, and that I also tell other authors or writers, is to make sure you're picking point of view with intention. Like, why do we need to know this scene from their point of view? Like, what is so important about that? And that was even something that yesterday I was brainstorming with a friend as I was writing, and I was like, I don't know whose point of view I should tell this from. And like, as I got through telling her the outline of like what was going to happen in the chapter, it became like very clear that it could only be from one point of view. Otherwise it didn't make sense, because then she's just watching things happen. And like for him, he's experiencing it, so that's like my process would be like brain dumping, and then all the way following through to like outlining to point of view with intention. And then once I'm done with my outline, then I start writing. And the reason for this, and I totally respect people who don't do this, but you're going to waste a lot of time if you don't. And the most valuable resource that we have is time. And how much easier is it to change, let's say the couple's fighting and you're saying they're going to fight in the kitchen. And then after you've finished everything, you realize, oh, it wouldn't make sense. It would be better that they're fighting in the car. Like maybe they're going to get in a car accident or like whatever. So now if you've just had an outline, you literally have to change they're fighting in the car, or they're fighting in the kitchen to they're fighting in the car. Whereas if you wrote the whole chapter, now you're having to change every detail. She was sitting on the counter. She walked over to the refrigerator. Now you're having to change every single detail, the entire staging of the scene. Whereas if you did it in the outline before you started writing, it was literally one sentence. So I think my advice always is outlining saves you so much time. And of course, like leave flexibility. Like if you have an idea and something pops up, like my outline is not my dead set of what the story ends up being, but it helps me to like I said, stop from wasting time. Merry Mischief List, I did a little bit more pantsing with that one because it was like more vibes, like it's more vibes, less plot. Like there's a little bit of plot, but like, it's a rom-com holiday. It's just like holly jolly vibes situation, like I kind of knew what was going to happen and just like went with it. But again, it was a novella. And I feel like people are a lot less critical of like plot in a novella, because especially holiday novellas, like they're there, and I'm not saying there's no plot, but like they're there for the vibes, like they're there for the romance, they're there for the holiday vibes of everything, you know, and so it's a lot easier. Whereas like, let's say Return Policy has like a very complex plot line, whereas like if I didn't plot it out, it would like, there would be things that I would go back and be like, oh, that does not make sense. Like, why did they do this? This doesn't make sense. So obviously every author has like their own process. But for me, especially as like a mom, I'm running a business, I have 2 kids, like I don't have time to waste like months of time to like keep rewriting, you know. And you still can be flexible. It's just like the outline doesn't have to be 5 pages long for each chapter. Like it can be as much as chapter 13, they fuck in the study room. Like that's all it has to say. Like you can still, you know, and then if you're writing the story and when you get to that point, it makes more sense for them to do something or be something somewhere else, you can still do that. But it's like your guidance instead of just sitting down at your computer and being like, what should I write today? You know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's in the study room. Goodness. Okay, so tell me how Scribbles Bookshop came to be, because now I'm just really intrigued.
Yeah, so like we kind of said in the beginning, Scribbles Bookshop is an online bookshop where we sell signed books by over 90 different authors, indie and trad. So basically how this came to be is, you know, as an author, I have sold signed copies. I lived abroad in Germany for 7 years, and I would go back and forth. And when I was in the US, I would sell signed copies in the US because like my biggest readership was always here. But obviously I couldn't sell them when I was abroad because it was just too expensive. And for any author out there, like, you know that selling signed copies is very time consuming. You have to like set up basically a whole fulfillment center in your house. You need to like, you know, get the book, sign the book, put the swag in, put it in the packaging thing, make like label it, bring it to the post office, you know, and it's really time consuming, especially if you don't do it that often. Like I think the majority of authors, like if they sell signed copies, they probably sell a few a month. Maybe if they're a bigger author, like a few a week. And obviously like really big authors, it's, of course, they sell a few, maybe even a few every single day. But again, you know, you need to take the time to like sit down, sign the books, get them to the post office. And it's just really inconvenient. And then on top of that, for the readers, like it's so expensive for you guys to buy signed books from multiple authors because you have to pay the shipping, right? So it's like, okay, great. Like I got this book for $20 signed from the author, but I paid $5.50 shipping. Now I want to get another book from another author signed, and again, $5.50 shipping. Whereas like with us, you can just buy both books and then pay shipping once. Obviously it's a little different because sometimes when you order directly from the authors, of course you can like get your name on it or something like that. And obviously that's not possible with us because we get all of the books in advance. But it still allows readers the opportunity to like have them be signed with swag and art prints and stickers, a lot of them, and like have a better shopping experience. And also because on top of that, a lot of authors, like they do signed paperbacks, but they only send them out like once a month. So you're ordering a book, and then like you have to wait a month or longer. Like if you you have to wait a long time to get the book. Whereas with us, we ship within 3 business days. So, you know, we're just trying to compete like every other bookstore. If you order from us, we ship within 3 business days. You don't have to wait unless it's a pre-order item, obviously, which we communicate on the website. And the only time we've ever had like major shipping delays, and by major, I mean like a week extra, was when we literally had a hurricane come to our house. So that's the difference too. And the reason like that inspired it was I was getting my, so when I was still in Germany, I did try to open up like a bookshop. I did have like my books with like signed book plates because I couldn't ship the books because it was too expensive. And then I was doing like drop shipping of like bookish merch. So like I designed bookish merch and then it was like drop shipping from a supplier. But the problem was it was like they were very slow at shipping. I had to make the products very expensive because their prices were higher, and like all of that boring stuff. And it just basically didn't work. And then when I was coming back to the US, I was like, okay, well, I want to try it again. But this time I want to like have the stuff stuff at my house. And that way, like, I can ship everything and people aren't waiting like 3 weeks for like their stuff and whatever. So it started because I was like, okay, I want to do my signed copies like of my books. And I was originally going to really like focus on TikTok shop. And then I was like, I could also have some like other bookish merch. Like, I don't know. In the beginning, I was thinking like sweatshirts, hats, or like whatever. And what happened was my friend, Katie Van Brunt, she writes for The Plot. She was moving from Greece. She's a military wife, and they were moving from Greece to Hawaii. And she was just going to be in like the continental US for like 10 days. And obviously, like in all of that, she had had a book release like a month before, 2 months before, and obviously couldn't really do signed copies. Like she did do some signed copies, but it was like very expensive, yada, yada. And I like had been talking with her that, I'm going to reopen my online store to sell signed books. And she was like, oh, well, what if you like did mine too, like fulfilled mine too, so that like she could get the books in, sign them, send them to me. And then like I would fulfill it, and that kind of just like snowballed into being like, okay, well, if I do it for you, like I could do it for other people, Cause I was like, as a business, it makes more sense. Like, I'm not going to do consignment where like you send them to me and then I'll send you like the profits. Like I'll just buy them from you. And then like when I sell them, like whatever. And then so it kind of like snowballed from there. And it was really funny because she actually didn't even know that story until like 3 months after we opened. Because it all just like happened, it was like she agreed. And then I was like, let me ask some other people. And before you know it, like actually we did a pre-order period for like April to July. Because keep in mind, in this time, I had a baby in February and we moved from Germany to the US in May. So we had like a lot going on. But I knew that I wanted to start this. So what I did was I coordinated with 30 authors to set up a pre-order on our website. And from April to May, people were pre-ordering their signed copies of their books on our website. And like once I arrived to the US, like they were shipping the books. Like a lot of them even got to my parents' house like before I got here. And like we were getting our house ready. And I was literally like, the first thing I did was like start setting up my office and getting like books on the shelves. And like we quickly realized that we were going to like need another bookshelf. And now we have literally like bookshelves, and we just ordered like the warehouse racks, like all throughout our whole house. Like our living room, like our hallway, our bedroom is like full of books. And it's just really crazy to me how like it happened just from like one friend being like, hey, can you like fulfill this for me? Like, and me being like, okay, like I could do this. And for me, like it didn't make sense to just open a regular bookstore or like a romance only bookstore. And I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with that. I think that's a wonderful thing. But I just felt like if I wanted to do it, I wanted to do something unique. And then like seeing that pain point, but before I even, so, I signed up for Ingram and like getting books and all that. And then before you know it, I had already had so many authors on board. I was like, like they're all going to be signed. Like, why should I do anything except for that, And when I started sharing about it, like a bookstore where all the books are signed, like people were really responsive to that, because it is something unique. And that's kind of like how everything like came to be. And like I said, now we have almost 100 authors. Like I said, I think by the end of next week, if not definitely in November, we'll have over 100. Which is just so crazy to me, because when I see the marketing materials from like April or even July, we had like 30 or 40. And we work directly with every single one of them. Like in the traditionally published authors, even like we still work directly with them because like I send them the books and they send the books to me. So it is a lot of coordination. But I've also like met really wonderful people, and it's also great because all the authors are super supportive, and a lot of them don't do signed copies themselves because they don't have like the time or the energy or whatever. So it's really great because like once a month I'll just be like, hey, I need more books. And then they just like send them to me, and then that's all they have to do, so they can like focus on their books and focus on their social media, and like they know, okay, I like sold an extra 20 books this month because like Scribbles bought some or whatever. So it's been really great. And another thing that I'm very excited about is like, being an author myself, like I understand like how much people make, how much their royalties are, like all of that. And like, for example, when a bookstore orders my book on Ingram, and that's a wholesaler for buying books, for those of you who don't know, I make like maybe $1. Like maybe. Ingram they print the book, they keep the majority of the money, and then the bookstore sells the book and they make more money, and like I get like $1. So for me, working directly with an author, let's say the price is the same, $11. Instead of the author getting $1 from Ingram Sparks, they're going to get like maybe 5 or 6 per book. And like, imagine like if I buy 5 books, now they've made $25 or $30. Whereas if I ordered them from Ingram Sparks and went around them, they would have made 5. They can't even buy a coffee. Like you can't even go to Starbucks for $5. And that's 5 books, like 5 people reading the book that they wrote for hours, and they don't make anything. So something that's really important for us is like making sure that it's also beneficial to the authors. And a lot of the times, like baby authors, debut authors, like I'll ask them their wholesale pricing and they'll literally send me their print cost. And it's like a full length book, and they'll be like, oh, it's $6. And I'm like, is that the price that you get from Amazon? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, okay, add some money on top of that, and that's your wholesale price. And I think that's also something for us is like, I always like try to make sure, of course, sometimes maybe I don't know, maybe I don't realize it, but the majority of the times, like if I see, and as an author, I know that must be your print cost, I literally tell them, you can't charge me that. Like you have to make money too. So for us, it's very important that the authors are getting compensated like for their value, you know, because there's this big thing that people are like, oh, don't shop on Amazon, support indie bookstores. But what a lot of people don't realize is if somebody buys my book on Amazon, I get like $4 or $5 or $4 to $6, depending on the book. And if somebody buys my book from an indie bookstore, I get 1. So from an author's perspective, we make way more money when people buy our books on Amazon versus Ingram. And then I'm trying to like offer this middle ground where it's like, okay, we're going to have an indie bookstore that you can buy indie books, and the indie authors actually get paid.
Yes.
You know, and it's not like to blame any bookstores who do order from Ingram, because the coordination of getting books from hundreds of authors, or if you have a big bookstore, potentially thousands, is like insane. With Ingram, you can order, 500 books at a time, and like it's easy. So I understand, and that's definitely something we're working on in our process moving forward of like how we can streamline it when we need to reorder and like all of that boring stuff. But that's like basically like how we started, and how we really want to like be like, so like as an indie author myself, like I have to support the other authors, like it's really important to me. And that's why, a lot of stores do consignment where authors like give their books basically for free. Like they would send me their books, and then when the book's sold, I would pay them. But I don't do it that way. I pay the books in full, and then like I have them on my shelf, and then it's done, like the exchange is done, and that's something for me that was important as an author, because I'm like, look, if I'm going to send 5, 10, 20 copies of my book to a bookstore, like I don't want to wait for my money. Like I need my money. And like, I spent the money to pay for the copies of the books that I sent, and I know some people, like we have a author like sign up sheet, and we've had like over 300 signups. And I'm sure there's authors out there who are like, I can't believe we haven't been contacted yet, or like who are unhappy about it. But, it's literally only me, like our whole budget, and I pay for everything. If I was doing consignment, I could have hundreds of authors by now. But it's important for me that like all of the authors are getting fairly compensated. All of them are like taken care of and happy and supported and everything. And, if that means we grow a little bit slower, then that's fine for me. Hopefully people can like understand that too.
Yeah. Especially considering there are so many indie authors and not a whole lot of people who do what you do. Like I've seen a few that do middle like that. There are a couple, but they're not always signed. And even then it's like, okay, it's maybe me and one person, and the price is more than what you would have gotten it on Amazon.
Right. And that's the problem. Actually, I just posted something about that on Threads before we had our chat. So I'm talking to an author about getting her holiday books for the store, and she's hybrid, so she has some indie books and some trad books. And for the trad books, of course, she sent me to Ingram, which is very normal. Come to find out, I literally pay the same price on Ingram as anybody can buy her book for on Amazon. So as a bookstore, I pay $13 for her book, and on Amazon, you can buy the book today for $13. Like, there's no way that bookstores can stay in business with that comparison. Yeah. So for me, obviously it's different because I actually take the effort. I get the book signed. A lot of them come with swag and bookmarks and book prints. So I know that I'm offering something different. Like, if somebody wants to pay $14 for the book on Amazon and they don't want to pay $24 for the book on my site, I understand that. But if they want it to be signed and they care about that extra little touch, we have something for them, you know? Yeah. So, you know, of course you're going to have those readers who don't care. They don't care about signed copies. They care about getting the cheapest price possible for book. And, you know, more power to them. I'm a broke girly too. I get it. But for us, it's important that we offer something unique so that Amazon can't just like shove us out. Because otherwise, I mean, I have some indie bookstores and indie romance bookstores like that I really admire. And I think they have great content and they're great for the community and everything. And I just think to myself, like, I talk to my husband and I say, how will they survive? Like, yeah. For us, we offer something unique and I'm grateful for it. And we're trying to like form a community. But I'm worried for like my coworkers, I guess I would say, because when Amazon sells books for the same price that we can get them at on Ingram, I mean, sometimes I even send authors that are traditionally published the books from Amazon instead of from the publisher because it's actually the same price and it's quicker. Yeah. It's Amazon Prime shipping. They get it the next day. We can return it if they're damaged. And, you know, and it's just crazy to me because as an indie author, Amazon has been wonderful. I would not be able to have gotten as far as I did without them. They offer a platform for self-published authors to get your book out there in a way that was not possible before. From an indie author's side, I get it. Like, I appreciate it. I get more money from Amazon than I do from any other retailer. As a bookstore, it's like, oh my gosh, how will you compete? You know? Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, fortunately for us, we're trying to like maintain community and do something unique and everything. But I just wish there was a way around that because or at least if the publishers would discount a little more or something, you know, that you could try to compete. The fortunate thing that I will say is a lot of people still will pay extra to shop in store. They want the experience, like they want to go to the local store. They want to support indie. And that's the important thing for all of them is offering something that Amazon can't, which is like either better packaging or a better shopping experience or more personal or in person. And I think like if any like, you know, bookstores are listening, it's like just being unique, like is what you have to do, you know?
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the reasons why I was drawn to your store anyways, because honestly, I found you on Threads and I was like, this is amazing. I'm like, because your posts have been getting really huge, especially right before the hurricane. Like your posts were getting a lot of hype and I was like, well, I can help. And I haven't bought myself anything nice recently. And all of these look really interesting. And so I'm just going to, we spent a pretty penny and my husband has no idea how much I spent. We're just going to leave it that way.
It was research. And I will say like to people listening who like are authors or maybe small businesses, don't sleep on Threads. Like we have gotten more virality from Threads in the past like month or two. Like even today last night to today, I had a thread go viral, get like 2,500 likes. And like, I'm not famous. Like it's just, and that was after like months of like consistent posting and getting like 2 likes, like getting nothing, like, you know, and so don't sleep on Threads. Like it's it can be very overwhelming. There's a lot of drama over there. But as a small business owner or as an author, kind of like keep a look on like what people engage with and what type of threads like go viral, and like try to make yourself unique. Because I don't know what it is. It's kind of like the TikTok phenomenon. Like in the beginning, TikTok, it was like way easier to go viral. Like, you know, and like it was way easier. And now I don't know if it's just that there's so many users or so many people making the same type of content or like whatever. But right now it's threads. And like, I'm not saying not to focus on anything else, but I literally like, I'll go on threads and I'll post like a couple in a row and then I'll like peace out and go check it later. And it's not like every single day something hits. Like I'll have like a week or 2 weeks where like barely any likes, barely anything. And then I'll get like another one that like, for some reason takes off. And that's funny that you say that you found me on threads because I had like the most exciting night we ever had was I had this thread go viral, and like we could see the visitors on the site, and it was like growing and growing and growing. And I think the most that we had got up to like 38 people at one time. And for us, like that was a lot. Like, you know, like, not everybody bought stuff, but I mean, we obviously like we had sales because a lot of people were checking out the website. And it wasn't like anything crazy, like to compete with like Barnes and Noble or anything. But like for us as a small business, like it was a lot. And like I literally, like my husband and I like stayed up like very late because we were just watching like on Shopify, you can like see people like popping in and out. Like I can't like see where you are like at your house, but like, I can see, oh, someone from New York, someone from Boston, someone from Miami, like, you know, and it was like literally you could see them like popping in, and like the thread was like going viral, and you could see like 35 to then it got to like 38 people. And we were like, this is crazy. And like that was from threads. And we had a lot of people like order, and, you know, if you can get somebody to order from you once and they're happy, then it's a lot easier to turn them into like a return customer, like once they've already ordered. So, you know,
I will be a return customer.
Yeah. And then like you said, so before the hurricane, I mean, obviously it helped the marketing, but it like wasn't for marketing. Like, so basically after seeing, what the last hurricane did to everybody, and seeing people who weren't even in flood zones, like lose their homes, and the water damage and everything. And like, for me as a small business owner, I have 3,000 books in my house. And I literally think all the time to myself, like, this is my livelihood. Like if I lost these books, I don't have anything at all. And like, sure, you could create a crowdfunder and you could ask the authors, can they help, and like whatever. But like my husband and I, like we've built this business from the ground up, like with our money, like with our heart and blood and sweat and tears. And it's like, I don't want to like need that, you know? And so it was like very scary because, as I'm sure, like you said, you're like located like Chicago area, you said?
Oh, I'm in Texas.
Oh, in Texas. So like I'm pretty sure like everybody in the country was like watching the news and watching this like storm, and it was very scary, like very scary. And we were fortunate that we were on the east coast of Florida and not the west coast. So it was less scary, but still like the people that got hit the worst from the last hurricane were in like North Carolina. Like they were not directly hit, you know, and we live in an apartment and the roof's like 15 years old. And so, you know, it just kind of started because I was like, if anybody wants to evacuate a book, like I'm not asking for donations. I'm not asking for, you know, you to just give me money. It's just, hey, if you've been thinking of placing an order, like let's get some books out before the storm. So that way, if something happens, at least that was like, how many books was it? It was 187 less books that I had to worry about, which was so awesome. And so so maybe if you've seen that on the news, actually the city that I live in, Fort Pierce, was on the world news with David Murr because we had a freak tornado outbreak. And there were, I think they said on the news yesterday, the final count was that there were 17 tornadoes that touched down in our area. And
Wow.
like people died, people lost their homes, and like we were not hit directly by the hurricane. Like it went a little north of us, but because of this like freak tornado situation, like our city had so much damage, like in certain neighborhoods, you know, and to the point like there was like an EF3 tornado, which means like basically unsurvivable. And in like a retirement community near us, it literally ripped people's houses off. So what we're doing is, because I was so grateful, like I said, we had 187 books that we got to evacuate before the storm. And I think it was like, I don't know, 50 orders or 70 orders. It was something crazy. I was packing till 1 a.m, like basically up until the day the storm came, trying to like get them out and get them away before the storm actually came, you know. And so thankfully my parents' house and our house, and like thankfully there was a tornado like 200 feet from my brother's house, but it was like it spared him. But a 4x6, like he said, a piece of somebody's roof like literally fell out of the sky and like hit his truck. So he does have to like get his truck fixed, but they were very lucky, like, you know. And so we were fortunate. Our home was fine. All of our books were fine. So what we're doing is throughout the month of October, we're donating $1 for every book sold. And and like people could also choose to leave an extra donation on top of that. And so between like donations and how many books we've sold, we've raised almost $1,000 so far, which is just so amazing. So our goal is 2,500. We have like another 11 days to do it. But we have raised $1,000 so far, which I think is crazy because I started from October 1st. So like all the books that people ordered to evacuate, that was $187 that we like could start with. And then it, you know, kind of like grew from there. And I had like some authors even just like donate money and not buy anything. And it's just been really wonderful to see people like stepping up to like help our community, because, you know, a lot of people, they donate to like FEMA or the Red Cross, and like that's wonderful. I think that's really wonderful. For us, we're going to be donating in our community, whether it's by like buying supplies or diapers or whatever. Like, so we're kind of waiting because everybody's helping right now, you know, like everybody's giving money, everybody's giving food, everybody's giving support. And we're kind of waiting to actually like research, like where would this money or supplies or whatever like best allocate to, because as I'm sure the people know from the storm before ours, what happens is everybody wants to help and everybody's there, and then it gets really quiet, and we want to be able to like give a little bit more once it gets quiet, and even if that means like helping one family, you know, like rather than splitting it up. So we're just kind of like waiting and gathering donations, and we'll see how much we can get by the end of October. But I'm already so grateful for like everybody who helped evacuate a book or who's like ordered to help donate. And it's just like really great to be able to give back to the community, even though like we're not a physical store, like, you know, we're not like in the community, like we just live here. And it's nice to know that even if it's a little bit, like to somebody $1,000 might be the difference that they can like get another car like after theirs is gone or something, you know. So we'll just have to see like where it will be best allocated. And
that's really the story warms my heart. I've been seeing it a lot. I've been seeing you talk about it on Threads because you're pretty active, and so it was just like I get to ask you about this now, because not everybody gets to have like that one-on-one. I'm honored. Anyways,
well, and it's hard
to have a little girly moment.
It's hard too, because as a small business or like, and as an author and everything, it's like, I don't want people to think it's like just for marketing or just for clout. And like, of course we need to utilize these things to raise money, because what else are we supposed to do? And I wish we could donate more, but we're still a small business. Like we use this to pay our bills. Like it's between donating another $1 a book or paying my electric bill. Like I have to, you know, like I have to find a balance. But we are happy to be able to like help our community. And like, again, going with Threads, like people love to help a cause. you know? So, and that's even something we've been discussing, is it like, should we have like a cause every month? And if people want to donate, that they can donate. Like, I don't know that we could donate $1 every single book, every single month. But we like enabled a donation space on the checkout. And we're like also in talks where it's like, does it make sense for us to like leave this on and pick a new, you know, thing every month? And even if it comes out to $100 a month or $50 a month, like that's $50 that we can donate that organization wouldn't have had otherwise, you know? Yeah. So just trying to see like how we can survive as a small business, but also like help our community or help those in need.
Yeah. And I wonder, and this is just like how my brain functions, but between the storms and running the business and writing, how do you, like, obviously I know you plot and it saves you a lot of time, but how do you manage? Yeah. How do you balance? How do you manage your time?
So honestly, the answer is I don't. Like writing has fallen so far away. So basically I was always like a full-time, like as long as I've been an author, I was a full-time author. I was like, first I was a stay-at-home mom, and then I was very fortunate with my debut and my follow-up book that I was able to be a full-time author. And then when I opened the bookstore, that takes up like all of my time. Because I'm sure, as you can imagine, like 90 something authors, 200 titles, plus we have like other items, bookmarks, stickers, tote bags, candles, like whatever, like random things. Like we have a full on retail store, like everything. Like if we were in a retail space, like the space would be full. Like, you know, we have a full on retail store. It's in our house. And I'm sure, as you can imagine, that requires a lot of work. So what happened was I was consistently putting Scribbles above writing, because Scribbles brings in the money to feed our family. And that goes along the sides of, in February, I lost my TikTok account and my author income dropped 90%. So I went from making a full-time author salary to not even being able to like pay the girl that helped me with marketing. So that goes to also say, don't put all your eggs in like one social media platform. I had kind of like let Instagram fall to the wayside because like nothing was happening there. Like I was not getting any traction, like, you know, but so basically all of that happened at once. Like I lost my social media account. I had a baby. We moved from Germany to the United States. I started the bookstore, and the bookstore was growing, obviously. And that's what brings in money to feed our family. Like my husband and I, we do it full time because we came and he was on a green card and, you know, boring immigration stuff, but he had to wait for his social security number and all of those boring things before he could get a job. And basically, by the time that his social security number came, we were having the shop up enough that I was like, I'm going to have to hire somebody. So does it really make sense for like you to go work somewhere and then for me to pay somebody else? Like, you know, and then plus we have a baby at home, like a newborn, you know? So we decided that he was going to work with me, or like work for me, I guess, you know, doing like basically any random thing that we need to, he's the muscles of the operation. And so long story short, Scribbles is our main income. Like it's what pays our bills, what feeds our family. And so the thing is, when it comes to the choice between writing or doing something that pays the bills, it's like, again, you know, a lot of authors have a full-time job and then they write on the side. And when they have a choice, they have to work on a full-time job and they can't write. So I was having a really hard time finding balance, but at the same time, I do know the value of publishing again. Like I know publishing will bring in money, like for sure. And like, I do have a readership. I do have people excited for the next books. And I do have like now my supporting people of Scribbles who I think also would be interested. And, you know, and so for me, it's like, I do see the value of writing another book and publishing it. And like, I'm not going to publish anything I'm not proud of. So basically a couple weeks ago, my husband and I like had a really like, I don't want to say serious conversation because it's not like that serious, but we had like a important talk where I was like, I have to write. Like, I don't have a choice. I have to make it a priority. And that was the switch. Like in my brain, that was like, okay, Scribbles is important, but so is writing. And so it's like,
Mm-hmm.
even if I only write 2 or 3 times a week for like an hour, that's still 3 hours that week that I wrote, you know, whereas like, I had literally like weeks go by or months go by that I didn't write anything because I just kept saying tomorrow, 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 you know? So what I'm doing now is during the weekdays, the first thing I'm going to do in the morning is write, because it's kind of like going to the gym. Like if you don't work out right in the morning, you spend the whole day talking yourself out of it, or like, I don't have time, or I don't feel well today. So for me, I feel like the most energized in the morning. My brain is the most there in the morning.
Yeah.
And then you still have the whole day to get everything done, you know? So now what I'm going to do to try to balance it a little more is the first thing I do after, like, when I sit down at my desk to actually work for the day is going to be to do like whatever like a half an hour or a 1 hour, like writing sprint. And because you can't edit a blank page, and even if it sucks, there's more words on the page. So I think that's like you were asking about, like, how do I balance it all? I think what it means is prioritizing, like what's important. And I actually like asked some of my friends who like work full time and write part time, like how do they manage it? Some of them have kids, some of them don't. The ones that don't have kids, the advice, to be honest, was not really helpful because they don't understand the demands of, you know, once you're off your 9 to 5 job, if you don't have kids, like you literally have time, you know. And if you have kids, it's like, okay, well, I'm off my job, but now it's 3 o'clock and my son is home from school until he goes to bed at 8 p.m. And like, I don't want to always be working. And, you know, so it's a lot of times like nights like tonight, working after the kids go to bed, like trying to balance things like that. And I think with writing, just making it a priority, like it is important, like putting the value in it again and saying like, yes, I run a bookstore and yes, it's important. But like I said to my husband, I'm like, if I take half an hour a day, or let's say I take 1 hour, if I spend 1 hour a day working on my book, are you honestly telling me that I don't have 1 hour a day? All the time I spend on social media, on Threads, on Instagram, talking with my friends, talking with my parents, talking with my husband, playing with my kids, which I don't really want to count because you have to do, you know, but it's like, think about all the time you have in the day, the time you're screwing around, making a longer lunch, a longer dinner. You're telling me I really don't have 1 hour, like one single hour. And I know that some people, like, maybe they truly don't. If it's like between writing or showering or writing or getting sleep or like whatever. And I've been there, like I have been there. But now I'm at the point where it's like, if I do it first thing in the morning, I just know I can't waste an hour like engaging on social media and scrolling and everything later. I have to like post and like engage a little bit, and then I get my 15 minutes and that's it, you know, because some days you do more, some days you do less. So I think it's just about like prioritizing and like what's really important today. And like if I want to get another book out by like it was supposed to be March, but now May, I'm going to do May. If I want to get a book out by May, like it has to be a priority. Otherwise I can't, it's not going to happen. Like it doesn't write itself, you know? And it's hard because I am in this unique position where I am like every day, like in constant contact with authors, and like I am a cheerleader and I'm always cheering them on. And, but as an author myself, whenever people have cover reveals or they're having a new release or announcing a new book or they're sharing teasers, like there is that little bit of like, I don't want to say jealousy because it's like self-induced, but there is that little bit of like, I can't wait till it's my turn again. Because I remember like the feeling of like teasing and like people being excited and like the feeling of like leading up to release day and like everything that comes with it, and like actually releasing another book and having it out there in the world. And it's like, I remember all those feelings and like, I can't wait to have it for myself. And it's so hard, like seeing everybody around me like have that. And like, I know that it's no one's fault but my own, obviously. Like I have to, it's like, if you see the person standing there that looks like has a 6-pack and looks wonderful, you know, everybody's always like, oh, you know, that bitch, she looks so good, like whatever. But like she worked her ass off, you know? And so it's like these people are working their asses off. And if you want what they have, we gotta work our asses off too. And if that means that I gotta work for an hour every night after the kids go to bed and by the time the book comes out, I mean, the book came out. Like, do I care at that point that I was up an hour later every night? Probably not, you know? So like you were asking, it's like about prioritizing, I guess, like what is really important. And obviously you can't sacrifice like the ability to pay your bills, but if you can like rearrange your schedule a little bit to like, if your writing brings you joy, like that's your 1 hour of joy a day, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So on the topic of writing, we're back here. Can you tell us, is the next book you're writing Crystal Bay University number 3?
Yes. So
or technically number 2.
Even Exchange. And like I said, this book was actually supposed to release January of 2024. But I stopped writing it and wrote Merry Mischief List instead. I have no regrets. I love that book, but it does like hurt my soul sometimes because it's like, it is a novella. And, you know, it's like, I always say I have like 2.5 books published or whatever.
Yeah.
But it was very hard, like putting that to the side and then deciding like, do I start on something new? Do I go back to the work in progress that I had? So what I ended up doing, because I did like have like 60,000 words for this manuscript, and like a normal novel is like 80 to 100,000 words. So I was like, if I want to publish sooner, the best thing would be to like use this existing manuscript and like, because it did have like a lot of very good kick your feet little things in it. And I was like, it's to use it, but change it to like what I want it to be, I guess, which has its benefits and disadvantages for sure, because there are times where I'm kind of like stuck in a corner because I'm like, well, I liked this scene, but it just doesn't make sense for the story anymore. So the book I'm working on is called Even Exchange. And if you've read Return Policy, it's based on the characters Noah and Charlie. She also goes by Charlotte, so Charlotte or Charlie. And it is a friends to lovers, like fake dating, summer camp vibes, accidental pregnancy situation. And that's what I'm working on right now. And it's fun. You're going to see like sprinkles in of like the characters from like Merry Mischief List and like from Return Policy. And basically, like I said, when I originally wrote it, it was like very dark. Like Charlotte had a very dark backstory. Like she had a lot of darkness in her. And I've changed that a lot now, especially after writing Merry Mischief List. I'm leaning more into like the rom-com vibes, and like not totally a rom-com, but like in Return Policy, if you read it too, there's like humor. Like there is humor, even though there's like a darker underlying plot. And so now I'm kind of going back to that with Even Exchange too. Instead of it being like even darker than Return Policy, it's going to like have a little bit of like, not even darkness. It's going to have some more like heart wrenching. Cause like, you know, we say that, mention the topic of accidental pregnancy. And, you know, there's going to be some more like serious conversations and like, how are they going to handle it? Like Noah is graduating, or Noah graduated and Charlie's in school, and like, how are they going to manage it and whatever. And there's more like in the plot, and it's hard as an author to know what's a spoiler and what do the readers deserve to know. But I think that also comes down to content warnings. Because like, let's say, spoiler alert, he's not the dad, but he's the daddy, like situation. And some people hate that. Some people do not want to read a book where there's an accidental pregnancy and he is not the father. And that's fine. But for an author, it's like, how do I market it so that people are surprised, but people who don't want that, like, don't read it, if that makes sense. So I think that comes down to like content warnings. Because for me, I would like to market it as like accidental pregnancy, but I might not necessarily be sharing like before he's not the dad, but he's the daddy kind of situation, you know? Because I do think like those are things that readers like to like be like, holy crap. Like, you know what I mean? So as an author, it's hard to know like how you should market it so that people are like satisfied. but yeah, so that's the book I'm working on right now. I just got through like a very fun like gala scene, like fancy gala scene, and that was very fun for me because it wasn't like just editing from the manuscript that I had before. It was like an entirely new scene that I like added in because part of like right now is like me just editing the stuff that I already had and then like, you know, putting in the new stuff and like seeing what works. And I feel like it feels so daunting because I'm still working on the first draft, but I feel like once I've finished the first draft, then it's just editing. And it's like, even if I have to read it 50 times and like improve 50 times, like there's something there. And it's like, you know, they say you can't edit a blank page. So until the words are there, it feels so daunting. And then I remember when I was writing my first book, someone said to me, the main reason that people don't publish is because they never finish their first draft. And that like really stuck with me because it's true. Like how many people do you know that say I'm writing a book and they didn't finish the first draft? Because the thing is, once you finish the first draft, like you have what you need to continue, you know? And I think it's just that first draft is so daunting that usually when people give up, like 99% of the time, it's still in the first draft phase. And if you can just finish that, even if it's like the first draft is garbage, like it's going to be horrible. It's going to be terrible. It's going to be the worst thing you've ever written in your whole life. But that's where editing comes in, you know? And it's hard as like with your first book, you're like, it's fine. I'm like, this is my first thing. It's going to suck. It's going to be bad. And like, after you've written 3 books, you're like, why is it still so bad? Like, why? I've written 3 books, but that's just how first drafts are. And you have to remind yourself that the final version of all your books, like if I go pick up my book off the shelf to remind myself the type of writer that I am, it took months and months of editing, and people, like tons of people, like people say that writing is a solo profession. It is not.
It's
like
not.
there are writers out there that can write themselves and don't need anybody, and that's wonderful. But I would say 9 times out of 10, like we have a team, like a whole team of people that are like helping us. And these traditionally published books that come out, like don't fool yourself into thinking that those people wrote the book and then the book came out and there was not 100 people in between, you know? So as self-published authors, like we have to form our own village, so to say. But it's totally worth it. But you have to remind yourself when you've published 3 books that you think are good and they get good reviews, and you look at your current first draft and it's total garbage, like you have to remind yourself that's normal. Like they all, like, don't look at your published books if you're like feeling down. Look at the first drafts of your published books and then look at your published books and remind yourself, oh, I can do that out of this, you know?
Yeah. Everything's a work of art. It just depends on your perspective.
And I think it's funny because a lot of people, they don't realize how much work goes into it. Like in the past, like 2 weeks alone, I've had like a few people say, I'm writing a book. And I'm like, that's great. And they're like, so, like, where should I upload it on like Amazon when I'm done? Like, I'm almost done. And I'm like, whoa, slow down. Like you have, you know, you're at A and you have 50 other steps before you get to publish, you know? And like multiple people, like they're like, oh yeah, I'm almost done. And where do I publish? And I'm like, oh, you're like, have you edited it? And they're like, oh no. And then one of them was like, oh, it's in a journal and I just need to like type it up, you know? And I'm like, you are so far from being ready, you know? And it's like not meaning that in like a mean way. Like even if they're the best author in the world, like you still need editors and beta readers and everything. And I think there's this misconception, even for some new authors, that they do that. Like they write their draft and they upload their first draft like to Amazon with a cover, and they don't realize that there's all of these steps. And then they're wondering like, why are the reviews negative? Why is my book not selling? And it's because you have to go, no matter how good you think you are, like you could be the best writer in the world. You still need an editor. Like you still need other eyes looking over your work. Like, you know, and like these big published authors, like they have had like tens of eyes or hundreds of eyes, like look over their stuff before it got to you. And the thing is with Amazon and with social media, I mean, you might have a great story, a unique story, but people are comparing it. Like with covers, for example, like people are comparing your cover to other covers that are out there. And if yours doesn't look professional, like yours is not going to get any attention, because there are thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of other books out there, you know? So it's just so important.
So many books out there. So little time to read all of them.
Right?
So little time.
So little time.
That's all I've got.
Awesome.
I'm chatted out, and it has been such a pleasure chatting with you. I've got some really great information. I feel like I got the insider tips here.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. It's always, you know, hard to know what to expect. And I don't know, I always feel like I talk too much, but I don't know.
I loved it. I loved it. And I tried to make it really relaxed and just like talk about whatever you want. We'll talk about your books. We'll talk about if you read or not. We'll talk about if you do anything else on the side. I know you told me you've been struggling to read. You got a lot of other things going on. That's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me. It was an honor to be on your podcast.
Thank you for joining me. And I'll make sure to get all your information into the show notes for all of our friends.